Welcome. You've reached S.J. Thomason with Christian-apologist.com. And I'm super excited to report that Steve McRae is back on my channel. He was here just a little while back, and we were talking about a lot of crazy topics. We're especially focusing on the way that Steve is probably one of the most controversial agnostics on social media. And why he's controversial, I think it's because he says whatever he wants to say. He doesn't really worry about people's feelings. He doesn't. It's not something
that's true. I mean, I was a monster. I don't give a damn about people's feelings.
No, but I mean, if somebody starts attacking you, you don't worry about how they're going to feel about you actually acting them or counterattacking them or coming right back at them and basically giving them a taste of their own medicine. So I think that's great. And so I've always found your timeline on Twitter is probably one of the most interesting timelines, including today. So there's never a day that it doesn't have something on it that makes me laugh. So today I went through and I saw a bunch of things that were pretty funny. And so I'll refer everyone to go to your timeline on Twitter if they want like some entertainment and to see you giving sort of a spunky responses back to people who start trolling you, because you definitely have a lot of trolls. And so yeah.
I have noticed.
People are even inventing accounts that are talking about your lawyer, people's CPAs, or people's. So there's just all this craziness going on. So for anyone who doesn't know you, and I think probably a lot of people maybe might even be getting on here who might not know you, can you let us know a little bit about yourself and where we can find you and what you've got going on right now with your great new channel? Well, I should say your revived channel. So let's see if we can chat about that.
First, I don't know how controversial I really am. I mean, it's just more along the lines as you said, I say what I want. I say what I want, when I want, how I want to say it. And most people are okay with that. Matter of fact, a lot of people that have been longtime supporters of me, they wish that, they want that. And I want that back from them. There are a few people that cannot deal with that type of brute honesty. And it's not that you don't respect people's feelings. It's more that, as the expression goes, and I hate idioms, I really do, but this one actually is kind of apropos, is that, facts don't care about your fifis. And there are certain material facts to be had in certain things. And what I do is I tell people material facts when it comes to, atheism, agnosticism, which people have now, many of them have gone and looked into it and go, well, damn, yeah, Steve's actually right on this. They've talked to actual philosophers. They go, yeah. And I guess there's a few people that just don't want to accept that, and they make it personal. And because of that, they have gone after me viciously. They've attacked me. They've attacked my family. They've attacked, not just the arguments and the ideas, which when they try is usually really, really poor rejoinders, but they have to try to denigrate me, have to try to slander me, have to try to defame me. And that's part of the thing of being in the internet, is that it's not that I'm controversial, it's just that certain people rather go after me personally, and they've done it for years. And the reality is, all it does is seems to solidify my base. But hey, it's their time to kill, because I mean, they've gone after me for a very long time and to no avail.
Yeah, a lot of people come after you, and I think one of the groups of people who sometimes come after you are the ones who say that they lack a belief. So some people call them the lack theists. And I think that you have distinguished atheism from agnosticism and said that atheism, as defined in certain places, usually refers to non-belief in the existence of God. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, it's not even a matter of how things are defined. These are all descriptive things. It's how they're utilized, how they're used in the literature, and what utility they have. And the word agnosticism has multiple utility that is associated with that word. So when you read it in the literature, there's something to be conveyed by that. Is information to be conveyed of how you're supposed to interpret that word in context with the paper or the literature. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of narrative put out by atheist organizations that agnosticism is just merely a form of atheism. And they've done actually a pretty solid job at convincing people of that, even though when you ask them, well, where's the literature on this? Where's the citations from this? Where's the papers on this? There's just none to be had. They are literally making things up in order to promote their narrative for political use. Now, I'm okay with it being political. Dr. Paul Davies writes in SEP that, it's a political thing. David Silverman writes it's a political thing. I don't think anybody who knows anything about atheism is not going to agree that there's politicization of these things for strength in numbers. I get that. That's an argument to consequence, or more specifically, an argument to utility. But that doesn't mean there's not material facts to be had. And what I do is I relate to them the material facts and the logic. And that, if that makes me controversial, so be it. But I think a lot of people take it very personally because they are being told things by much more name recognized persons than myself, and they say, well, if this person says it, then it must be true. Steve can't be right. Well, unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. I mean, if you can show that the facts are wrong and that what I'm saying is wrong factually, I'm all for that. But they don't. They rather try to just go after my honor and my integrity and my knowledge, and it shows. And I think most people are aware of that by now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now, would you say, you mentioned David Silverman, so in case people don't know that, he was at one point the sort of leader or president or CEO, I don't know exactly what his title was.
Of American Atheist.
Of American Atheists. And then there's people like the Austin community of atheists, there's that group of people, and then there's the Faithless Forum. And I noticed that you don't really align up with, I mean, you know people from these places, you sometimes discuss things with people, you've had people on your shows from these different groups, but I noticed that you, I don't think that you are specifically in alignment with any of them. Are you members or anything like that of any of those organizations?
I'm not, and I'm specifically not. I keep telling people I don't belong to any organization like those things, because then you are kind of have an obligatory duty to kind of go into their party line in some ways. If you're a member of an organization, there are certain things that you have to agree with them on, per se, or you wouldn't be part of that organization, right? I mean, it's just, it makes sense that if you're part of the ACA, you're gonna agree with them on their core tenets. I particularly don't. So I'm not a member of any of those organizations. So I'm not beholden to the usages that they use. And I think that bothers people, because what they're trying to do is taking their usages and they're making it, their stipulative usages, and they're making it by fiat for everybody else. And that's where the problem arises, because myself and other people who are very erudite on these topics have been out there saying, hey, you can't do what you're doing because it's intellectually dishonest. You're telling people things that are just wrong. And we can show that they're wrong. They're demonstrably wrong, because you can go read the literature and see that they're wrong. And so we get a lot of fight back from that, a lot of kicking and screaming, people telling us, hey, why are you causing such a problem? Why are you causing schisms in the non-believers? And and it's not actually, and matter of fact, I'm willing to actually go on record to say that in my personal experience, the people that have actually listened to myself and other people talking about these things, I think have become far better interlocutors and far better at debate than they ever would be before. They basically destroy, no offense, but they destroy a lot of theist arguments, because the theist no longer has it in their quiver. Oh, well, you don't have a burden of proof. Or you're just a lacktheist. They don't have any of that anymore. The way we explain these terms, the atheist can go in and say, look, I am an atheist. I believe no gods exist, and I will show you why I believe that, why I'm justified to, and why the theist is not justified to. That's how a good discussion, I think, goes. That's what I want to see, right? Personally, when I look at a debate or watch a debate, I want to hear that kind of arguments. Now, that doesn't mean they all have to be that way, but the ones that do, I think, are much better off in their approach, and how much they can say, hey, this is why I believe the way I do, and they're very justified to do so. And that's what I hope atheists can start doing, is justifying their positions more.
And that brings up a good thing, because I've seen on your channel, I've noticed some of your strategies. Sometimes you bring in Christians, like you just had Fuzz Rana and Cy Gard on. Mm-hmm. And those two, if people don't know them, are Christian leaders in the community. They're scientists. They're wonderful people. And you've brought on Hugh Ross a few times. So you've got him, and he's a great guy. And so you bring in Christians a lot of times, but then you also, I noticed that you had something going on your show that was something like building an atheist argument, or you have different shows on, and I've noticed that you have these on your channel, and one of them had to do with
but yeah,
something like improving the atheist argument. What was it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I've had things on. I mean, I don't know specifically. I mean, I've had numerous episodes. I don't really have a show per se. I mean, I have a channel that I do. I didn't want to be locked into a specific format, because I'm all over the place, and I like it that way. And I can have various co-hosts come in. I get various topics we can discuss. But I have had things where I've showed atheists how to have better arguments, right? Stop using bad arguments, start using good arguments, right? And I even had somebody not too long ago argue with me, well, why are you showing atheists how not to, why you're going after them for bad arguments? I'm like, well, why wouldn't you want to go after them for bad arguments? So they start using better arguments. I go after theists for bad arguments too. This is because I don't have an ideological agenda. I don't have a narrative that I have to promote. If I see a theist using a very bad argument, I will go after them for it. I mean, you and I both agree that like younger creationism is bogus. They have really bad arguments, so I will go after those things, and any kind of theist argument that I think that just doesn't make quite much sense to me. But atheists, for some reason, the very basal ones, when you get the newbies, I guess the new atheists come along, and they start running. It seems like the progression I've noticed over the years. They start running very simple arguments that people have told them, no, don't do that. Like the Jesus mythos, was it Horus and all these other gods relating to Jesus, and that's complete hogwash, the Zeitgeist thing. But they'll start with something like that, and then they progress to the harder arguments. But once you get into like low priors and logical problem evil, evidential problem evil, and things of that nature, moral epistemological arguments against God, divine liars paradox, that's when you're in the good stuff, right? But it takes some atheists a little bit time to get there.
Yeah, I noticed, and that brings up one of my favorite arguments in support of God is actually the moral argument in support of God. And yesterday, I listened to Friended Adam, and you know him, and he was discussing with Sarah Michelle. And I think, I don't know if you want to plug that tonight they had a debate, and he actually is an atheist who was supporting the idea of Christian morality. And she was saying that secular morality is superior. And I know that I think you're having maybe one or both of them on your channel tonight.
Yeah, I'm having Sarah on tonight at 5 Pacific, and Adam says he wants to join, which he's more than welcome to. I haven't seen the debate. I'm going in cold, but I do have my own positions on it. There are some issues I have with general view of Christian morality. But of course, I wasn't in the debate, so I don't know what specifics they were going for, but I will have my 2 cents to throw in on that, because I do see some issues there. And I think that things like divine command theory can be crippling on one's morality, because you're kind of just relegating your responsibility to form a strong ethics.
Be done, or thy will be done, as C.S. Lewis did. Thy will be done, as C.S. Lewis did. Distinguish the two. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But going back a little bit, so what do you see in after you and I know we're not going to go down this road and talk about this so much, but after you and I chatted last time, you basically had a fallout in a channel that you had been co-op working on with somebody else. And so that's one of the motivations. And I noticed that there were a lot of people who on Twitter and also on your new channel sort of left this other channel and they came over to your channel. And even some people, and we both know who this one person is, but there's one person who's even making a kind of a funny little joke about being people's lawyers, and he's got a lot of comedians there.
I know who, and I've been on record. I said, and I know I know that parody account. I know who's actually doing it. You know who's doing it too. And they're good. They're good person. I still don't know who the Without a Crystal Balls is, though.
Oh, I don't know who that is either.
Yeah, I don't either. I have no idea. Because I will talk about Katie Polson to the cows come home for the things that she has done, because she's not on. There's no legal things going on with her, so I'm happy to discuss her specifically in the things that she has vehemently said against me, which were defamation to no end, and especially have been libelous and slanderous. By the way, she doesn't know the difference because she gets it wrong. But there's somebody parodying her account, and she was accusing it to be relating to me. And one of the co-hosts I have coming in every so often named Cheshire. Yes, we call it Cheshire. We know it's Cheshire, but she likes it Cheshire, and well, it's her avatar, her pseudonym. But I don't know who that account is, but I do know who the lawyer account is. Yes. that
particular person really cracks me up. I mean,
they're hilarious.
It's really, really funny sense of humor. So, but I wanted to say, I'm looking at the chat here, and someone is asking, Gary Moore is asking, what is Steve McRae's morality? Where does he get his morality from? Why do no interviewers ever ask him these questions? So did you want to?
They have asked me those questions. I talk about it extensively. My morality, a lot of it comes from my parents that was instilled with me. And people will call that a cop-out, but it's not a cop-out. It's actually how we get we get our morality is from social normative things. And there's 2 types of moral structures. There's meta-ethical and there's normative ethical. I don't really care that much about the meta-ethical considerations of whether morality is objective or subjective. Those are just that's how you look at a proposition. That's all. I think there is objective morality because propositionally it makes sense to do so, that we can have moral facts that are able to be looked at by or access to by multiple people. That's what objective means in this particular case. That doesn't get you to a deity, though, unfortunately. But when it comes to normative ethics, I do tend to virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is the position where if you have something that's virtuous, it's in between 2 vices. and it's the what's called the golden mean between them, or some I think maybe
Kind of like
might
the
be called
Goldilocks idea.
yeah, it's like I think people call it the Archimedean mean, but
Hmm.
basically, let's say I have the virtue that means something we strive for all the time. I want to be have the virtue of being honest. Okay. Now that is between two vices. One vice being a liar, and the other vice being overly honest, brute honesty, where you hurt people's feelings. Right? There's a middle ground there. I'm not somebody like Hume would say that lying is always wrong. I think there are times where a white lie is beneficial to a person rather than hurt them. Right. I mean, again, the whole Gestapo comes to your door. Do you have any Jews? I would be like, no. Right. Because that's how I look at virtue ethics. I'm not a Kantian, or sorry, not Hume. I'm a Kantian. I'm not a Kantian ethicist. You know, and Kant was the one saying that you shouldn't ever lie. Yeah, my morality, to answer your question, I tend to virtue ethics, although I can appeal to consequentialism. I can appeal to utilitarianism. But I think the beginning of your moral framework comes from your friends, your family, and your parents. I think that's where you start learning morals from.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the idea, and I'm glad you brought this up. The idea of I study a bit on normative ethics, and I looked at the distinguishing basically the idea of utilitarianism. In case people don't know, is the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Correct.
Consequentialism is the idea of you're looking at the consequence and you're trying to figure out exactly how you're going to make that consequence through reasoning and intuition. Then there's the idea of a deontological ethics that basically says we have moral duties. It's on that end that I think there's a pretty strong argument in support of the foundation being God. The idea that where did these duties come from that are universal and objective? And so I would, but I don't want to. We weren't going to debate that today. But
yeah, no, I mean, I don't get to the God part, but deontological things I do think exist. I think we do have duties, but they're not coming from a transcendent being. I think that we do have duties as a society. Now, I don't get into what's called contractualism, which is I tried reading up on it. If you ever want to read something mind bending, try reading contractualism. There's a book called
What We Owe to Each Other.
It wasn't by John Rawls. No, it was
not Rawls. Okay, I guess I'm getting that mixed up.
It was What We Owe to Each Other, I believe. But I tried getting into it. I couldn't understand his argument for contractualism. So maybe one of these days, some philosopher have to come in and try to explain that argument. But actually, I knew John Rawls' daughter. Fun fact.
Really?
Yeah, she was actually a Facebook friend of mine for quite some time. Her name was Elizabeth. But she never wanted to come on because she didn't want to talk about her father because she was not really knowledgeable of that stuff. She only used to proofread for him, and she didn't want to mischaracterize his memory. But yeah, she was a really nice woman. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Fun fact, yeah, John Rawls. People may not know who that is, but go look him up because his books are still required.
Pretty famous, yeah. No, that's good. So I'm just looking here. It says follow up from Gary Moore. He wants to ask another question. How does his morality feed into his agnostic position? Could he please answer it in plain English instead of using all of these massive words? Is there a way to simplify what you're saying for them?
They're two completely different things. It's a weird question, right? Morality is what you do, which you think is right or wrong, right? What do you think is the best course of action to be taken given a situation? Morality is which, especially like in business ethics, right? I don't think there's much differentiation between ethics and morality when it comes to philosophy, but I do differentiate in business because in business ethics, there's a whole field of that, right? And the way I look at it is basically, what do you do when nobody else is looking? Do you hold yourself to a higher standard that even if you were never to get caught, would you do certain things? That's the position I kind of go for my own basis and my own morality. That has nothing to do with Agnosticism. The agnostic, if you're looking at what's called the ontological question of God, meaning to break it down for Gary Moore, to break it down for him, the question of God, does he exist, right? So the question is, does God exist? It's either God exists or God does not exist. That's considered to be what's called a dichotomy. It can be one or the other. Can't be both, can't be neither, right? Either God does exist or does not exist. The agnostic basically doesn't believe either one. It's just, you don't believe that he exists and you don't believe that he doesn't exist. You're in the position that you're on the fence between it. The theist would believe that God exists. You're a theist, or you believe that there's a God. There's at least one God that exists. The atheist believes that there are no gods. Again, coming from a philosophical point of view, not the ACA or AA or AR, but from philosophy, the atheist believes that there's no gods. But the agnostic says, well, I don't believe either position. Now,
and you call yourself,
it's like he knows that one of those positions must be true, but he doesn't know which one, and he doesn't weigh in on it. It's called suspending judgment. But morality has nothing to do with that.
And you call yourself a temporal agnostic, I noticed. So that's the idea of, and do you want to tell people what that, because I think that means that at this point in time, you'd say that you don't know whether or not God exists.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm an agnostic when it comes to the ontology, and then I'm a temporal agnostic when it comes to the epistemological proposition, and that's all that means. And I mean, for the people in the audience, all that means is when you talk about agnosticism, there's the position on God existing. That is, I don't believe either way. Okay, I don't believe God exists. And I don't believe that he does not exist. But there's also an epistemological proposition attached to it, which is the knowability of God. Can gods be known? Which is rather archaic in some ways, but it still exists. In that regard, I'd be a temporal agnostic in that I think that the knowability of gods is probably knowable, but we don't have that knowledge at this time. But I would think that, a million years from now, if no deity has come about and life has been to the stars, I think at that point, any rational human being would say probably, there's no God. I mean, you as a Christian would probably admit if Christ hasn't come back in the next couple thousand years, it's probably a problem. Would that not be? Not that you're around for it, but let's say that you were.
It's just the way that modern technology and everything's changed over the past 100 years. I think that it seems like we're heading towards something. And I think that the fact that Israel was restored in 1948 after being gone since the year 70, and then you look at the book of Daniel and some of the prophecies that are in there with respect to what could be a third temple and the abomination of desolation and that kind of stuff. And actually even what's going on in Israel, there's a little fringe group that named themselves the Sanhedrin that are talking about building this third temple. So I'm looking at this stuff and I'm saying, wow, there's some interesting things out there that we might want to pay a little attention to. I don't want to see a third temple because it's actually would have to be built in the same place on the Temple Mount where the other two temples were built.
Might be a problem.
It's a big problem because there's a Muslim dome there, basically. It's a very holy site for both Muslims, Christians, and Jewish.
Well, let me ask you, let's say, okay, it is theoretically possible to go forward in time as much as you want. I mean, we probably could get the technology to do that relatively quickly if you people know about relativity. So let's say we could take you and we could shove you right now into a machine and poof, you come out 10,000 years later. Okay, not even that far-fetched. Okay, but let's say that we can do that because I don't believe you can go backwards in time, but you can go forward in time as much as you want according to physics. So you're now 10,000 years in the future. Society is completely different. People don't even know the name what Jesus is. They don't even know that name. The society where there's no gods. At that point, what would you be thinking?
I would probably want to commit suicide and come back.
I don't think it
horrible.
Works that way.
This is the worst.
I don't think it works that way.
No, I see. I don't see. You look at it this way. So 108 billion people have walked the planet. That's according to the Population Reference Bureau. And 57% of those people have walked the planet after the year 1. And I think something like that's kind of fascinating. So if you look at the growth of the population and you look at what we're doing to our with respect to global warming and climate change and that kind of thing, I think that the size of the population just alone speaks to what's going on with our planet. And so I would be surprised if 10,000 years that we're able to sustain a planet that actually hasn't been destroyed in some way.
On that note, when it comes to climate change, if we don't do something pretty quickly, even in the next couple hundred years, there's going to be dramatic changes. I mean, I think that if you would look at the planet 1,000 years from now, it would be unrecognizable compared to what it is now. I mean, most of Florida coastline is going to be gone. California coastline is going to be gone. I think there's going to be huge problems.
Yeah, I actually mapped out where I live with the elevation, and where I am is actually would be oceanfront property. I'm inland a little bit in Florida, so I would be on oceanfront property. Although I won't have a job, and I won't be because my school will be underwater. But
and it's going to be like 130 degrees every day. I mean, I think mankind will survive. I mean, we adapt. We're a species like anything else. I think that we'll adapt as a species. For the most part, but if not, we're going to die out, and then some other species eventually might take the place. I mean, I think that the Earth will always be some kind of habitable thing for at least another, millions and millions, if not billions of years. What will habit it, I have no idea, but I think we're just a blip if that's the case.
Yeah, I saw something that cockroaches can survive nuclear explosions.
Yeah, they're pretty resilient.
All that'll be left is jellyfish and cockroaches.
They're going to be sentient one day. Be a race of jellyfish and cockroaches.
Yeah,
they'll probably end up going to nuclear war with each other, and they'll start all over again.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So you look at that. One of the things I have my classes do in a couple of my different classes is I've had them look into the island system of the Kiribati Islands, which are in the South Pacific. And basically the water's been rising, and there are all these different little atolls that the people have had to leave certain islands because the water's risen so high, and they'd had to move to the highest island, which is Tarawa, because that's the one with the highest elevation. And so now it's overpopulated, it's overcrowded. They're getting pollution coming in from all parts of the world, washing up on their beaches, people's plastics and all of this nasty stuff. So we got some serious things going on out there that people have
no question.
Yeah. So what do you take on the people who claim that there's no, people don't actually, let me, just so the crowd doesn't think that I'm saying something here. Nobody denies that we're having climate changes and that the sea level's rising. The big argument, the political argument between Republicans and Democrats, in a lot of cases, a lot of the Republicans tend to lead towards the idea that man has nothing to do with all of this. And I think that's hogwash, because I think that we can show the methane increases and things like that in the air. We can show what's going on with oil and that sort of thing. And we can show that how that's greenhouse gases and how that's impacted it's basically impacted pollution retention and that kind of thing. And so that's why we're getting some warming issues. But I'm just pointing that out, because what do you think of the people who argue against this whole idea?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that when it comes to anthropogenic gases, that's probably the leading cause of global warming. Global warming is a fact. I mean, I don't even know anybody that argues that the Earth is not getting warmer. It's 1.8, I believe, centigrade more than it was even 150 years ago. So, I mean, it is warming. Now, there could be multiple reasons why it's warming. I think there could be solar things. There could be a couple of reasons, but natural gases. But the majority is probably man-made. And if it's not, it's damn close. But even if it isn't a majority, we need to treat it as it is. It's still a significant amount of added greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere that's causing some degree of global warming, whether it's over 50% or it's a little bit under 50%. Doesn't really make that much of a difference to me. At that point, it makes no difference. It is still a leading cause, definitely a leading cause, and we need to do something about it. This is why I think that people that are arguing against global warming, I don't think they have any leg to stand on, because even if they are correct and they are right that it isn't anthropogenic gases being the number one cause, does it really matter? It's still a huge amount. Even they have to recognize that. And we do need to control certain things. Matter of fact, when I was in the nuclear field, after I got out, I went to a biomass steam plant. And one of the things they had with these CO2 scrubbers and stuff, and what it is we have a certain amount of carbon emissions that we're allowed to put out for the stacks. And that was a big thing, so even back then, they were recognizing that these emissions are having an effect. And they, as people in the industry, they have to put some kind of regulation on it. And unfortunately, I think that the government nowadays is not taking it very seriously. The people that we have in charge are not taking it seriously.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think that your channel does get pretty popular, is because you actually can speak to a lot of different topics. And I think that people like that. And it's because you have kind of a unique background. You were associated with the military. You've been involved in some sort of, I forget exactly what your title is. What's that?
I'm just old.
He's been around for a while.
Old people get run around. Yeah, old people kind of pick up things along the way, basically.
Yeah, and that's another thing that you were talking about. Katie, is Katie the one who made allegations that you were harassing people?
Yeah, exactly. She's the one that made allegations. I sexually harassed her because what was the main reason? Something along the lines. It's so bizarre. It's like oh yeah, I finally found somebody actually posted something. We had Mercedes Carrera on, who was a adult porn star, and she asked me how it went, and I was like, well, she's really articulate, she's intelligent, and I put as hot AF, if you know what that means, right? And I mean, she's not really that my type, but she's a good-looking woman, right? Or at least, she could do herself up pretty well, and she, that was it. And then people were finding her using the same terminology. Oh, this person is hot, AF, and this person has nice boobs, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, here's the thing: I wasn't even talking to Katie about Katie. I was talking about somebody else. I'm like, how's that sexual harassment? Are you out of your freaking mind? But this is the narrative that she tried floating as a trial balloon, right? And I'm like, okay, if you're going to try to Me Too me, you better have better. I mean, there are people that I like in the community. That people know this, and I have some female friends that actually I like and that I'm very close with. The biggest complaint they have against me is I'm not overtly sexual with them enough, because it's not who I am. And so when people accuse me of sexual harassment, I'm like, do you know what the fuck you're talking about? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't like curse on your channel because I know you're a lot of theists, but because Reds did enough of that last time. But I was like, do you honestly think that's going to fly with me? Do you really? I mean, come on. It's just it's bizarre to me. That's all.
Well, see, that's one of my biggest fears. And I teach human resource management, as you probably know, and I teach things on sexual harassment. And the Me Too movement has really changed things. And we're seeing lots of claims of harassment coming from lots of different companies. But my worry is always that you have to also think about males, and it's usually males doing the harassing. It's probably the vast majority of harassment's coming from male superiors to female subordinates. But the thing is I always wonder about false accusations. What happens about the times when people make the accusation, but something didn't really occur?
It's sad. It happens. I had it happen once in a very minor way, but that person lost their job over it because she admitted she lied.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can happen. And it's very disconcerting, but when you tell the truth, you have these accusations. I think anybody who's ever been in retail has some accusation been levied against them, whether it's a customer, whether an employee. I mean, you're not doing your job, you suck at this, in customer complaints. They're very far and few between compared to the praise. But what happens in business? You get all the praise you want, but you get that one customer complaint, boom. But I always told the truth, and I always had enough responsibility put on my shoulder where the people that put me in charge would say, okay, if you can justify why you did a certain thing for a customer, you're fine, right? So if I did something like did a discount for them or made something to make them happy, if I can justify it, then I never got in trouble for it. And I never did get in trouble for it. That was one thing that certain retail companies would do. They would give you the empowerment to make those kinds of decisions as a manager, as long as you can justify it to the upper management, right? Now, they may not like it, right? Because they're like, oh, well, we lost money on that. I'm like, yes, but we lost money considering this, and this. And like, okay, yeah, you made the right call. But yeah, there have been people that I'm sure have been falsely accused. But this wasn't even a false accusation. This was just bizarre. What the hell is going on here? This was out of the blue just because she wanted to try to come up with something. And I was like I said, are you kidding me? This is weird with me, of all people. Like, I'm like asexual pretty much. I
So I think that's good points. And I think that also speaks to some of the things that we're seeing in our culture. And Jonathan Haidt's talked a little bit about this. I don't know if you follow his stuff, but he's talked a little bit about the idea of that we're seeing lots more claims of people who say they're hurt. They're claiming that they're victims, or they're claiming that they're the victims of racism or sexism or transphobism or anything isms, all the isms that are.
I get every ism against me at some point in time.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is pretty dangerous, actually.
Yeah, but again, people have to look at it for what it is.
Hold on just one second. I'm just going to turn my lights on real quick. Hold on.
Sure.
There we go. Much better. Okay, sorry.
Sure, no problem. So when people don't have a really good rejoinder or counter argument, they tend to throw things like out there, right? Oh, well, this person's transphobic. We had Matt Dillahunty. People were calling him transphobic. Now, I might disagree with Matt on a few things, but my God, he's definitely been very pro LGBTQ and very, very staunch advocate for gay rights and for transgenders. I mean, what else would persons want from somebody, right? And yet he's called every so often people saying he's transphobic. So the words mean nothing to some people any longer, because they're just throwing it out there anytime they have a disagreement with somebody. Oh, you disagree with me, you're racist. Oh, you disagree with me, you're a bigot. Oh, you disagree with me, you're misogynistic. These words are used as weapons rather than what they should be used for people that actually do fall into those categories. And most of the time they're not even hiding it. I mean, there are people that are just so misogynistic and so racist and so bigoted and so transphobic, they're not hiding it. So why go after these people that are just the opposite? I mean, I left the Mormon church because of gay rights, right? I mean, because I thought that they were getting involved with the Prop 8 in California, and I think it was 2008, give or take, that I thought that was wrong. Now, granted, later on, I probably would have left anyways because I no longer believed, but that was like got me started in it going, why am I even associated with this church? Not that I used to go at all. I went from like 87 to 89, and then I just kind of fell away. But at 2008, I was like, yeah, I don't even want to be associated with them anymore, because this is something that I believe very strongly. And yet I had people going, well, Steve's transphobic, Steve's homophobic. And I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah. See, I don't like being called that either, because I support things like gay marriage. I consider myself pretty liberal on a lot of different topics. So if I
Oh, I know
and
you are.
I've
I know you
received
are.
some of those conversations too, and people say, "Oh, you're a homophobe or a trans," and I'm like, "I'm not. I'm really not." So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. My producer's, gay. My co-host was gay. Another co-host is transgender. I'm like, what more inclusionary things do I need? I mean, and by the way, none of those was just because I needed some quotas, because I actually are friends with them.
That yeah, and you just mentioned the Mormon Church. I want to go back to that for a second, because I saw something on Paul Gia's timeline, and so every once in a while I look at Paul Gia's timeline because he's kind of interesting. And I saw something on his timeline that said he thinks that where you're born is probably most likely to be what kind of church you follow. So if you're born into the Mormon Church, you're most likely to be a Mormon. I mean, it does make sense, and I'm sure we can look around the world and see
Oh,
that.
I'm convinced of that. Yeah, that's just makes sense. I mean, that's why you have countries that are predominantly Muslim, countries that are predominantly Christians, and so I wasn't born in the Mormon church, but I had friends that were, and their parents were the greatest people I've ever known. This is why people confuse when I defend things about Mormonism. It's not that I'm defending the church per se. I'm defending the people, because I have a lot of respect for the people. They were very good to me. They treated me very kind, and I'm not going to throw them under the bus because of some religious beliefs. Yet people will like, oh, look at Steve. He has this weird thing that he's defending Mormonism. No, I'm defending that I know some very good people in that church, and I think a lot of people would probably agree that they knew some very good people too. Now, were there some shit people? Yes. I had a really bad Mormon boss when I was in Utah. But I think you find that in any religion, right? So
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you could find, and I can speak to the same thing. I've been to Utah a few times and to different conferences, and I have a lot of colleagues that are over there, and they are the greatest people. They're very industrious. They're kind. They go out, they actually purposely go out and do missionary work. It's part of their university
food
experience.
banks.
So I don't endorse the Mormon faith itself. I don't believe in Joseph Smith discovered these golden plates or any of that kind of stuff, but I really respect a lot of those people.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. Like I said, I've worked in the food bank side by side with them back in Deseret Industries. This was way back in like '86 or something, before I even became a member. I saw firsthand, that they were doing good works, because they believe very strong in community and community service and helping people. So I don't know why people just dismiss that outright just because they have whatever beliefs that they have. I look at like you said, the utility, or not utility. Well, it is kind of a utility in some way. I mean, if the church is helping people, then that's a benefit. Now, do I think that they could do it without the church? Sure, but I'm not going to throw people that I've known all my life who are Mormons still under the bus, because I have people on the internet going, "Oh, look at Steve. He hangs, still has friends with the Mormons, or he's still defending Mormonism." No, I'm not that. That's just an asshole. I've known people for 40 years that are Mormon.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of Mitt Romney too. I'm thinking, imagine what our life would be like right now if Mitt Romney were our
Well,
president.
no, he's not my kind of Mormon. No.
So no, he's not. Well, he did some universal health care sort of thing over in Massachusetts.
He did some homophobic type stuff too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. He was like against gay marriage and some other stuff.
Okay, so he's not. I didn't realize he was. I followed him for that because I was thinking, imagine if Mitt Romney were in office, or even John Kasich, or these different people. He's not a Mormon.
I thought it was Mitt Romney that did something against the gay marriage message that he had, a video. Again,
I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard that.
Somebody in the live chat will probably know it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the live chat. So what else? What else should we chat about? So I wanted to talk a little bit more on your channel, more about your channel, because I think that people might not realize some of the things that you're running over there. And in case they don't, it's called the Great Debate Community. And I know you've got another channel too. We've got one Great Debate Community and one Steve McRae, right?
Yeah, the Great Debate Community is kind of a catch-all. I have people come on that run that for me. That was a carryover from where we had the Great Debate Community on G+. It's no longer G+, obviously. We have it on Facebook, and the GDC is more of a concept anymore, which is fine. But my channel, my main channel, is my name, Steve McRae, and that's what I run. Ask a Philosopher on. That's what I do some games on. It's all, like I said, it's a potpourri of stuff. I think that's what a lot of people want to see, because I have only a very small group of people say, hey, we want an actual show like the Non Sequitur show was, and I don't want to go that route for many different reasons. I might change my mind in the future, but right now that's not the direction I want to go. even though I've got wonderful people working with me. But right now we're doing what we want to do and enjoying it. And if people want to watch, that's great. I'm enjoying the time with Cheshire and Reds and Bullinator and Nick and a whole bunch of other people that are just wonderful people. And so this is what we wanted to do what we want to do. And if people want to watch, that's great. But I've always had the mindset, I'm always going to do what I kind of want to do. And not cater to specific people. Like you might remember, people were trying to make a hay about a Patreon that I had, a $50 Patreon that I told them to get lost. What they didn't realize is that Patreon was trying to buy advertisement for his channel that I didn't agree with, and harassing my friends. He was actually literally harassing my friends to get them to be, interviewed and taking what they said and changing what they were saying. And it was just a bizarre thing. And I was like, I'm not going to be bought that way. Right. I'm not, I love my Patreons to death. Don't get me wrong. And I try to talk to every single one of them, and every one of them has received something from me, and I keep them posted on stuff because I think it's very good to be connected with them. But when I have somebody who wants to buy content and say, hey, you have to do this because I'm giving you money, they can keep the money. I will not change what I do, how I say things, why I say things, and whom I say them to, or platform whoever I decide to platform because somebody's giving me money as Patreon. The Patreon, things like that, is they're paying because they're enjoying the content. Okay. They're not paying you to do certain things. Now, granted, obviously, if a patron wants something, I'm more going to bend over backwards to try to make it happen. But that's not going to change the format. And I'm certainly not going to have somebody try to buy their way to promote a channel that I disagree with. That's why I told him to keep his $50. But of course, that narrative never got out there very much. Or the fact that he was harassing very close friends of mine. So.
Yeah, sounds kind of like a bully a little bit. So that's probably fair enough to say. So another thing I wanted to ask you is, if you had, now that your channel is getting pretty popular, and I noticed that how many more subscribers, let me ask you this first, how many more subscribers have you had in the past couple of months since this whole?
I gained like 4,000.
Wow, and have you gained a lot of patrons too?
I gained 100 and a little over 105, maybe 110 patrons.
So now that your channel is starting to grow, I want to ask you
more than what I had. So I'm up to 136 patrons. Now, most of them are small dollar amounts. There's a few good sized ones, but
still.
Oh yeah, no, I it's funny. Somebody give me Jay something or other. I'm not going to dox him, but I'll just say Jay. Was a $5 Patreon and started today, and I wish I could give more of this, it's not a lot. And I'm thinking to myself, $5 a month is a lot. When I've been scraping by on YouTube for 6 years, not making barely anything. So if everybody gave $5, I'd be like, oh my God, I'd be like, I'd be doing okay. So yeah, to me, every dollar counts. I think that even somebody who gives you $1 a month is like, hey, they're giving you $12 a year, man. That's awesome. I mean,
yeah. And you've even had, I want to say, because I wanted to ask you, the question I want to ask you is, who would be your dream guest to get on your channel? A couple of dream people that you have out there that you've been thinking about trying to get them on and they haven't been able to come on yet, whether it's a theist or it's an anti-theist or whatever.
I would want Leonard Susskind to come on.
Leonard Susskind?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And we have a mutual friend, but he's kind of been busy with other stuff. He's got his own drama stuff going on, I guess. But he's been made aware to be asked on, which would be an amazing guest.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't even think that I have too many dream guests. You
even have a soap opera star who came on.
Scott Clifford.
Yeah, I saw that because I thought that was interesting. So you even have some famous people.
Yeah, I mean, I've known about him for a while. We've been communicating for quite some time, and we finally made it happen for him to come on. Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any people that you regret having on your channel lately in the past couple of months? People have.
No, as a matter of fact, it's funny. There's a lot of people out there spinning narratives about me platforming certain people. I've platformed a person that people were like, oh, he's a Nazi. Oh, he's a rapist. Oh, he's a pedophile, or he's a convicted rapist. And all these things have merit, but they stop at the superficial level, right? And like the first time we had like JF on, if you know who he is, nobody said a word on it. He was on with who did he just have a discussion with? Oh yeah. Psychopath atheist or psychoatheist, and no, it was the second time. Who was I don't remember the first time he was on, but nobody said a word about it. I think it was stated clearly. Maybe it was that who it was? Somebody remember? Is
this the same person that somebody was posting the rap sheet on Twitter?
No, Jeff Garify is a PhD in biology, but he's also somebody who's, I guess, a big fan of Richard Spencer and just believes in pure white purity. And I don't know, he's just got some weird race realism type stuff. But the first time we had him on, it was nothing about that. It was genes versus memes discussion, and nobody gave a crap. But the second time he was on, we just happened to have him on with a black racist person who basically, they both wanted segregation. He wanted segregation. The other person wants segregation. We're like, okay, well, this is going to work out too well. Who would have thunk? Maybe I should have probably planned ahead and thought maybe that's possible, but I didn't think of it at the time. But I will have on who I want to have on, and I have reasons for that. And people don't like the reasons, they don't have to fucking watch. Oh, by the way, I know I'm on your channel. I probably should be cursing, but
oh, that's okay. Now I wanted to ask you, because somebody's in the audience saying, "What about Jordan Peterson?" Now that would be a dream.
Nah, I'm not a JP fan.
No, but that would increase. I mean, you would get a lot of attention. People just mention his name, and suddenly you got 20,000.
Yeah, but here's the thing: I don't do things for the subs or the views, and I don't do it for the money. I do things that I want to do. I have no desire to talk to JP. So if I have no desire to talk to him, why would I have him as a guest, even though people would watch? That's not how I operate.
I've got another one to ask you. What about?
You might want to talk to him. In that case, fine. I'll have him on.
I definitely would like to talk to him.
That's fine. I tell you what, you can host for the night. I'm okay with that. I have nothing to say to the guy. I would be this guy. To me, he's just weird. But to finish up on your question, when people like Steve, Steve had a convicted rapist on. Well, but they don't go bother looking. And then they're like, oh, Steve doesn't know the background. Well, okay, let him think that. But you know what? I go beyond the superficial things, and I actually talk to the people. I actually have conversations with the actual individuals and their friends and the people they know. So I make those decisions. I make a conscious decision, and if people don't like that decision, they don't have to watch. But what's funny is they don't do that. What they do is they make it personal. Oh, look what Steve did. Well, yeah, it's my fucking channel. I will always run my channel the way I like to run it. And I hope that people appreciate that. Because if I start listening to people who tell me who I can and cannot have on, I won't have the channel that I want. The first time you listen to somebody that says you should not have this person on, or why do you have this person on, or tries to deplatform somebody because you want them on for whatever reasons, or you have more knowledge about certain things than they do, you're done. You're done. You're at that point. You've lost the plot. I think I think that a lot of people want go with this narrative. Hey, Steve had this person on. Let's go after him. Okay, so what? I have person on. Big deal, and I'll have him on again.
Yeah. What about? I'm going to name a few people, and you tell me if you would have them on your channel. So, would you have Stefan Molyneux on your channel?
No.
You familiar? Okay, no. What about
not his either? So.
What about Ben Shapiro?
I would have Ben on. I would have Ben, and the only reason I have Ben on is that not that I agree with him on a lot of things, but I got to tell you, he is a master at rhetoric.
Yes.
Yeah, and he has a lot of good one-liners, and I think he's very intelligent. And I think that he would make a good guest. Although, like I said, I don't agree with him on much.
Yeah, no, I think I listened to a lot of Ben. I listened to a lot of all of those people. I don't even. Oh gosh, I said a bad.
Yeah, was that?
You hear that? That's thunder.
Wow. Yeah, I heard that.
Florida, we're starting to get into storm season. So it's
that's gunshots. Just let you know where I live.
Yeah, no, I like Ben Shapiro too, because he is very smart. And actually, I would never, ever, ever debate that man.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. He's masterful at rhetoric, and so yeah, I find that to be a quality if it's done properly. Rhetoric is a skill set, and unfortunately, what I see is people using rhetoric incorrectly. They use what's called negative rhetoric, and I don't think that really helps a person. Now, granted, in a debate, you're allowed to use any rhetorical devices you want. Basically, I mean, look at William Lane Craig. I think he's the master of using bad rhetoric, but he does so effectively, and people buy into that. Now, if your goal is to win the debate, which if you go into a college, the goal is to win the debate. That's what the goal is. And you're allowed to use that kind of rhetoric to do it, right? You have to manipulate the audience to get you to on your side for that discussion. Now, I don't like that style, but that's how it is in most college campuses and most debates. I'm not a negative rhetoric kind of person. I think that you can do more effectively using positive rhetoric, but it's much more difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one thing that I think is very effective that William Lane Craig does that I think is a good idea and is the idea of simplifying things for the audience. He brings everything down to a very simple level, and I think that's been a good trick for him, because there's a
Maybe
lot
too
of
much
people.
so.
Yeah, well, there's going back to this. Think about the OJ trial, and I know you were around just like I was during the OJ trial.
I remember sitting on the chair watching it. Yeah.
I watched the whole thing. Because I used to be able to, I'd record it and I'd watch it, and I was fascinated by it because I thought he was so guilty. But the
Still
very
do.
clever thing that I still do. The very clever thing his attorneys did, though, is they made up that silly little thing: if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Right.
And that was this catchy little phrase.
Brilliant.
That it was
Johnny
brilliant.
Cochran.
Exactly.
Absolutely, it was brilliant. I mean, Johnny Cochran, he was masterful at that. That's what a defense lawyer does.
Yeah, so you simplify it. These people could have the IQs of 80 who are sitting there in the jury, but they might not remember anything about the trial or the forensics or anything that was shown to them, but they remember that catchy little phrase.
No, you're spot on with that. I've seen that with a lot of different things, and I think a lot of people are. I hate to say manipulated, but they're easily enticed by very simple snippets of information. They're not deep thinkers. And matter of fact, a lot of people that portray themselves to be deep thinkers, I find to be the most shallow ones. And I think that a lot of people that follow me and a lot of people watch my channel, they're recognizing that as well. They can actually spot people that before they thought, man, this person may have it going on. They're kind of a critical thinker and deep thinker. But once they actually learn more about critical thinking and rhetoric and logic, they're like, maybe this person wasn't as deep as I thought. Because now they're ascending higher than that person. They're learning about things that this person doesn't even know about because they've stopped and they're using negative rhetoric. That's all they know how to do. Because people like that have been in discussions. That's all they are. They're like they just throw crap out there and hope it sticks.
That's one of the things I think you brought up earlier. You said when people become atheists, like the brand new, freshly deconverted atheists come in there, and they a lot of times, and this could go on both sides. Both sides we each have our arguments that we come up with that come sometimes from simple ideas. Like William Lane Craig's got some pretty simple ideas and ways to break things down. But one of the things that you mentioned, I think a lot of people do, is they'll watch Matt Dillahunty, and he has a lot of kind of snappy little one-liners and that kind of thing too. And then you'll see that all over Twitter, his exact same lines that somebody else will say. Why did God kill God? Oh yeah, that's a good one. So
Matt's really good at rhetoric. I mean, but Matt also knows the Bible very well too. I mean, Matt's an intelligent guy, but Matt is also an activist. And I think that when you get into activism, you lose some of your credibility behind you if you start using idioms as your primary source of rhetoric. And I see that a lot with a lot of the atheist activists. Now, do I think there's a lot of good atheist activists that don't do that? Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan of like Atheist Edge, right? Jim Hall and TJ and Courtney and a bunch of and Fully Deconverted, Ervino. There's a whole bunch of people out there that are really, I think, when it comes to atheism, promoting not the agenda of atheism, but promoting critical thinking, and that their mindset is that if you are a critical thinker, you probably will end up being atheist, but they're not out there just manipulating people with idioms and saying, hey, you have to believe the way we believe using our terminology or else. That's what I see Matt and like people like Aaron, who I adore. I really do adore Aaron Ra. I mean, Aaron Ra is brilliant when it comes to phylogeny and things of that nature. And I will always consider him a good friend, even if he's like, maybe you could stay mad at me for the longest time, but he's always been a dear friend of mine and on a very long time. We disagree on a few things, but I see a lot of rhetoric, and I try to avoid that kind of stuff. I want to go with more of the material facts. So
yeah, and I have witnessed some of your interactions with Aaron Ra on Twitter, and I see sometimes they can be a little bit tense. I think coming from, actually, I would say his point, like he's the one who's acting kind of tense on it. And I also am blocked by Matt Dillahunty.
Yeah, I'm blocked by Matt.
He did a proactive block. He tweeted at me back like in November, and then in January, I went to look at his account and I found I was
really talked to the guy. I talked to him once off air before our show that we had with him, and I tweeted, I don't know, it can have been more than a dozen tweets. So it's not like we've had year-long conversation. But I mean, he has his own agenda. He has his own thing to do. So I don't really care if he blocks me or not. And I actually, this is going to sound probably bad, but it's fine if they block me, because that means I get free reign to basically explain to people without them tagging themselves in, derailing it, because that's what happened when Matt blocked me. He jumped into a conversation that he had no idea what was going on. It was on what's called multi-valued logics. And he was trying to interject classical logic into it. And I'm like, what does this have to do with anything, Matt? And he's just like, wrong. That's all he said, was like, wrong. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean much to me. Okay. No offense, just because you're an atheist activist doesn't mean by fiat you are correct. And I can guarantee it, Matt has made many mistakes, and I'm sure he's admitted many mistakes when it comes to these philosophies kind of stuff. But he's willing to learn, I think. But he still has the position where if he's shown that he would come out and say, look, what Steve says is correct according to philosophy. I mean, if you were to go study these things and become a philosopher, and you would go to college and take courses, this is how you would have to use these terms. If he was to come out and say that, it would probably be very damaging to him. So he can't come out and say that, although he might actually know that, because he's not a dumb guy. I mean, I think Matt Dillahunty is actually kind of brilliant for what he does, but it's again a lot of rhetoric.
What did you think about his debate on the channel on the Non Sequitur with Matt, Inspiring Philosophy? Did you?
I didn't watch that one. Well, are you talking about the one they had on our show, or the different one they did? Because he debated Matt Dillahunty on my channel.
On your okay, yeah, that one.
Yeah. I thought it was a good discussion. Inspired Philosophy is a smart guy. I think he knows the arguments pretty well. I think he relies on the arguments too much. I think he gives theist arguments too much credit. But they had a really good discussion. I can't take that away from IP. I think that IP he uses a lot of rhetoric too, and I think that he makes a few mistakes. And I think that I think who was it? Was it Dave S. or I don't remember. Somebody had broke down IP's arguments. Maybe it was Darwin's Greatest Hits, if I'm not mistaken. But somebody had broke down what IP was saying and showed from a very masterful philosophical point of view that it's not quite correct. But he tries. And again, I'm probably at a lower level than IP is. IP knows a lot more philosophy than I do. And I tried, but if I get something wrong, I'll try to correct it on it. I don't know if IP does. I think that he just kind of says, oh, well, I think he caters to his audience because he wants the audience to believe these arguments are sound. If I have a bad argument and I'm convinced it's a bad argument because somebody that I know is a philosopher that has said, hey, Steve, this is why this doesn't work. This is why it's not valid or not sound, whatever. I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to go, okay, I need to shore it up, because that's how I shore up my arguments. So it got to the point where I have really good arguments now that even people out there going, well, damn, yeah, that's, you know what? I can't really see a problem with that argument, Steve. And I have a few of them like that now. So because they were shored up by people that do know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you've also had Mike Winger on your channel. I don't know. And he debated Matt Dillahunty. Mm-hmm. Did you happen to catch that debate?
No, I've seen parts of those things. Matt Winger, Mike Winger. So he I don't know about him. I'm not gonna pass judgment on him, but I think again he's looking more to cater to his audience. And that's the one thing I do notice from certain theists is that they're looking to cater to the people that already believe, because I don't see anything from them that is convincing to somebody who's non-believer.
Yeah, I don't think. See, I think it's kind of impossible to convince a non-believer, a person who's a firm atheist, who's been an atheist for a long time, or an anti-theist. I don't really see. I mean, I've tried and I've realized that it's not going to work. So I kind of just threw in the towel and say, okay, I'm now going to work towards weak Christians. And so when I put out my content, it's going towards the weaker Christians who want to shore up their.
And I get that, right? You want to shore up the weak. You want to bolster their faith, right? I understand the reasoning behind that, but again, I'm not ideologically driven, right? I don't have an agenda to put forth where I'm not trying to bolster anybody's position. I'm just trying to explain to people things and let them formulate their own position, right? If they're just a weak atheist, if they can justify it, great. If they're a strong atheist and they can justify it, great. But they don't understand the differences and they really don't know the concepts. That's when they usually try to get in touch with me and go, Steve, can you help me at least conceptualize these things? And at that point, they can determine whatever position they want after that, right? But I'm not there to try to shore anybody up or to change their positions, theologically speaking. I don't care if you're a theist, atheist, agnostic, whatever. My goal is to get people to understand what they are in terms of philosophy and logic and reason. And I think that is the best weapon they can use, because at that, or at least I say best defense to weapons, because at that point, a theist can't say, well, you know what, you're just shirking your burden of proof, because as you know, I advocate that agnostics and atheists have a burden of proof. And I have numerous resources to support that. It's not just my opinion. There are actual experts that have written papers on this explaining why that they do. It's an epistemological thing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think that we're both kind of on the same page on that kind of stuff. So, and let me ask you this. If I don't know if I can't remember if I've asked you this before, but I want to ask you this because I asked this to a lot of atheists and agnostics. And one of the reasons why I think that changing someone's mind really isn't possible if someone has it in their mind that they're correct. And so I think that I wanted to ask you, if you did find out, like one day you died and you found yourself right in front of Jesus, what would you do?
Obviously, I really don't think most atheists that will say, "Hey, look, if I found out that this was all true," most of them, even though they say, "Oh, well, I would just tell God to go kiss my ass," kind of thing. I don't think that would happen. I think they'd be so dumbstruck and so blown away by it that they would do whatever it took to get into good gracious with that. I mean, and the reason I think that is because people have done atrocious things in order to kind of preserve themselves, and now you're talking about eternity. I don't think what moral good does it do to say I'm going to, on whatever conscientious objection, to burn for eternity just because I don't like this deity that happens to be the only deity that exists, or the prevalent deity. Now, do I think there's a hell? No. Do I think you burn for eternity? No. I think that was added much later on. I think that was a fear mode tactic to get people to believe. So I'm pretty well convinced that's all BS. But let's say hypothetically that it was the case that it's not, and Jesus says, well, worship me or burn for eternity in hell. Yeah, of course I'm going to go with the worship, but I'm also like, well, why are you making it such a carrot and stick thing? What's the reasoning, Jesus, that you made it so difficult for people to understand, with so many different conflicting messages from so many different interpretations of the Bible, that so many people, even the ones that did get it right, have no idea whether they got it right or right. It's basically, as somebody had pointed, I don't remember who said it, but they said it's like a blind man stumbling in the dark looking for a black cat. It's just impossible to find out whatever the truth is. People are just guessing, and then they're saying, well, this is actually the way it is. This is a fact when it comes to the Bible. And while there are actual facts with relationship to the Bible, well, this says this, that's a fact. As far as ontology, nobody freaking knows. It's all a matter of guesswork, I think. And you hope for the best.
See, I think I would say that, and I accept your point, because actually I had never really come into contact with any young Earth creationists before I got onto Twitter. I actually also had really not known many atheists or agnostics or young Earth creationists or flat earthers. I didn't even know there was a flat Earth population. So I made some big discoveries starting about 2014. and in the young Earth group, right? Well, it's been interesting, but I can say out of that young Earth group is a lot of them are very convinced that their interpretation is correct. And I think the old Earthers, which I identify with myself, I think that old Earthers tend to be a little more flexible, saying, okay, well, I believe the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. However, if God made it in 6,000 years, so be it. God can do whatever he wants. And so that's kind of the way that a lot of the old Earthers would take it. But I do see that there are a lot of people who say, it's my way or the highway. Dinosaurs were interacting with people. They're saying a lot of stuff that, of course, we don't have the evidence. We don't have any support for it.
You agree that not only doesn't have support, that the evidence that is out there is grossly counter to that narrative. I mean, overwhelming evidence against that. Man did not walk with dinosaurs. It's not that there's no evidence to support man walking with dinosaurs. It's just overwhelming evidence against that conjecture. Overwhelming so, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something we can look into and say, look, it is an ontological fact, and have a relative, pretty certain narrative that is the case, right? Now people can say, well, are you absolutely certain in a Cartesian sense? Well, no, but I don't think the Cartesian certainty actually exists. So
yeah, well, I think that's that view. And I think going back to your original point, as you were mentioning how a lot of different people have different interpretations of the Bible. But I think that from the Christian perspective, I would say that there's one very simple verse that if that's all you knew, you're good to go. And it's John 3:16, which I'm sure you know what that is.
Yeah, God so loved the world that he gave his own begotten son. But here's the thing with John 3:16. Even then, people will say, well, you still got to do works, or what does that mean to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that you worship him? Does that mean you have to pray to him? What does that actually entail? Is there a line of demarcation where all of a sudden, boom, you're now saved?
How I can answer that I think is really interesting. There's obviously a lot of people argue it's faith-based or it's works-based. Every other religion in the world basically tends to be more works-based and saying your actions are going to determine whether or not you go to you experience eternity, or that you're reincarnated as a higher level caste, or whatever it is that people think. It's very works focused all around the world. But the Christian perspective, and actually even if you do a deep dive, and I've been starting to do a deep dive in the Old Testament to see what some of the messages that are undercurrents throughout that is, I'm finding that, for example, in the First Kings and Second Kings, those books, all they do, they name a king. They identify a few of the king's actions, and a lot of times the actions are pretty bad. Like David, he basically slept with Bathsheba and then figured out a way to have her husband put to death by putting him into war on the front lines. So you've got, they're doing these actions that can be pretty bad. He was a murderer, he was an adulterer, he was all this kind of stuff. And then it says something like, and either God loved him, or, either he had God's heart and he was doing right in the way of God, or he wasn't. And in every single case, the reason they're doing right in the way of God is because they believe in God. And so it didn't have to do with whatever their actions were. I find that really interesting, because you see that.
I get that, right? And people, that's a narrative where people believe they're going to do the right thing because of their belief. And I understand that. However, I don't understand if there's a being out there that says, hey, believe in me, and based on grace alone. And yet, if you do works and you believe that works are required, now you're screwed. That makes no sense to me. What kind of deity, what kind of benevolent deity would do that and say, hey, you know what? You're supposed to just believe with me on faith alone. You're not supposed to, believe that works have anything to do with it, but you did. You're now SOL. That makes no sense to me. So I think that anybody who has faith that believes that works is required as well, I don't think a deity would care one way or another. It just makes no sense to me that a deity would.
Well, that's the going back to First Kings and Second Kings, and I want to bring up Job in just a second, because atheists like to talk about Job. And
well, yeah, God made his life hell. I mean, this was a devout follower, and God said, "Hey, you know what? Let's see. He's gonna talk to Satan and go, hey, listen, how much he's gonna mess with this guy." Well, that's a weird story, isn't it?
Well, it was one of those things where in these First and Second Kings thing, a lot of them mention the idea of walking in the way of the Lord, or walking with the Lord, or being in support of the Lord, and that kind of stuff. And Job, one thing that wasn't mentioned in the book of Job, but he was basically completely focusing on his works. And so God took everything away from him, and he still embraced God. And in that way, then God gave much. But
don't you think that was a story, like a parable, I guess, a moral story? I mean, I don't think there was any being called Job out there that existed where this story actually took place. I think this was,
it's possible. Yeah.
I mean, would it change Christianity one way or another? I doubt it. But, I just can't imagine, God and Satan just having a convo. Hey, what's up today? Oh, hey, God, how you doing? Oh, hey, Satan. Hey, that guy, that Job, he's a real, devout follower of mine. And Satan go, hey, you know what? Let's make a little deal here. I bet I could get him to curse you, kind of thing. It's just a narrative that doesn't fly with me. Now, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, obviously. But
it does help you to understand the faith and works distinction, and the fact that you see it in the Old Testament, not just in the New Testament. That's my main point.
Maybe. Here's the thing, though. As long as people, to me, are doing right and doing good, if I was a benevolent being, I'd be like, hey, you didn't believe this, you didn't believe that, you didn't accept, that my son, came to earth, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? You're a good person. I'm okay with that. I think that's, to me, what a benevolent being would be. And even then, even if somebody was not a good person, do I think that there's anything that justifies eternal torment? No. And like I said, I don't believe that is the case. But a benevolent being in my moral system, people asked me about my morals earlier, there's no degree of morality that I can see where a benevolent Christian being would do that to anybody, to have an infinite punishment for some kind of finite crime. That is not moral to me.
That's a line that I've heard from, and actually I've written against that. I didn't come up with that. That's like a Tracy Harris line.
Yeah, no, well, I don't think she even came up with that. I think that's been around for a while, but
I just wanted to point out something that I do hold. It's the idea of, is a crime finite or is it infinite? So if you commit a sin, like for example, when Hitler murdered, I'm taking a huge extreme here, but when Hitler murdered 6 million Jews, that actually had an infinite impact, because that could just keep passing down from generation to generation to generation.
It's still not infinite. I mean, you're talking.
I guess the word infinite is kind of strong, but it could have a long-term impact.
I believe in restorative justice, not retributive justice. More okay. And when this goes back to John Rawls, full circle. But when it comes to, restorative justice, condemning somebody for eternity in burning in hell there's not any kind of restitution, right? It's just pure vindictiveness. It's pure retribution. Now, granted, the Old Testament God is a vindictive retribution type God. I don't think even you would disagree. The way Yahweh is portrayed pretty bad. He's vengeful. He's jealous. He's vindictive.
Well, they put human terms on him to try to explain his.
Right, sure, anthropomorphic, no question about it. But he does seem to be a little petty and jealous, and if that's the case, though, why would a God make a hell for eternity like that? To me, it doesn't fly from a moral sense when we're talking about Christian morality. And again, we'll probably talk about this more tonight with Sarah Michelle tonight, because again, she had a discussion with Friend Forever, and I don't know if that came up, but something I want to talk about is the Christian narrative of, oh, you don't believe this, you're going to suffer for eternity. That to me is not a moral type of
well, let me ask you this. Have you read the book by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce?
No, I mean, I've read the Narnia series, but I never got into any kind of Christian apologetics. I'm not interested in apologetics, to be honest with you. C.S. Lewis was a long time ago. I mean, he died. When did he die? It's been a while.
He died November 22nd, 1963, the exact same day that JFK died and Aldous Huxley. Yeah,
I mean, so quite some time ago, way before I was born, 7 years before I was born.
But I wanted to just point that book out just for the audience in case they haven't read it, because it's actually, he is a brilliant writer, and what he envisioned in this is he envisioned that hell is kind of like this middle area, kind of like purgatory as the Catholics would call it. So his vision was that hell is purgatory. People choose to be in sort of this gray area, or this dark place where the sun never rises and it never sets. It's just sort of there.
But but where does he get that from?
Well, he just made it. Well, that's what's fascinating. It just makes you think. So here's what he says, just real fast. So people are on this bus from this gray area, and they get transported up into this sort of right outside of heaven area. And people are coming out of heaven to talk to them and convince them that, hey, all you have to do is give up your ego, give up yourself, come on over here. And the people, one by one, just keep getting back on the bus. So it's a really cute little book.
That's different than something along the lines of Dante's Inferno. These are just people that wrote stories at guesswork. I mean, C.S. Lewis has no more knowledge about what it is for heaven, purgatory, or hell than anybody else. He was a writer, he's a science fiction writer, matter of fact. Obviously, Chronicles of Narnia is science fiction, even though it has a lot of Christian overtones, clearly, with Asgard, the lion, and relationship to Christianity and him being resurrected and all that kind of stuff. But they're still, again, in the dark. And so we have no idea what hell, heaven, or purgatory would be, even if they do exist. But what I don't like is people using them as an argument, carrot and the stick. So either you believe this or you're condemned for eternity. When I hear a Christian start arguing, believe me, or you're going to hell and I'm concerned about you, I think that's a worse way to argue your position, because most people are going to have the entrenchment effect. And because I grew up like this, I grew up as a kid going, I don't like when you're telling me that if I don't believe the way you believe, I have to suffer some kind of punishment for it, because I got to tell you, it doesn't help your argument.
No, right? And I actually agree with you, and that's even based on motivation theories. If you can't motivate people with punishment, you motivate people with rewards. And so the idea, that I never even thought about hell until I got on Twitter, and I found that Twitter is kind of a little microcosm of hell. And I mentioned that before because it can be pretty bad. But I want to let me ask the audience, do any of you have any questions? If you do for Steve, I would go ahead and I will bring them up here. Was that the fairy guy? Oh, I think you said Asgard. I wanted to say that's Aslan. Asgard is the one with Thor. So,
but that's one of my girls in the chat. I mean, so I do have female friends. I mean,
is that Nicole, one of your friends?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go visit her in Colorado.
I think. Look, you put a little heart there.
I love her. She's great. I mean, so.
That's harassment, Steve. I'm going to have to report.
Yeah, I swear to you, she complains that I don't harass her enough. That's the biggest pet peeve, that I actually don't do a lot with her. I mean, we like each other, but I might take her out on a date one of these days. But there's a few people that might take it on a date. So
Didn't somebody just fly?
I'm a free agent, people.
Didn't somebody buy a plane ticket for some lovely lady to fly across the country and visit you?
I'm going to fly to her, actually. Yeah, that's a sweet heathen. I'm going to fly. Somebody actually had bought a ticket to fly her out here. I'm actually going to fly to her. I'm just waiting for my license to come in. I lost my wallet on a trip. So unfortunately I don't have ID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I went to go get, it should be here any day now. As soon as I get my ID, I'm taking a week or two off, and I'm flying to Boston, I might, and I, like I said, I'm trying to fly to Colorado. I might fly to Florida. Some people want me to go to Canada. I mean, I was kind of waiting till I get paid from my non sequitur show, but that doesn't look like that's going to happen in any kind of near future. But I have a little bit that because of Patreon and a few other things from last month that, you know, I'm going to use on myself for a change. I'm going to go. I haven't been anywhere in a long time, and because I don't think going to LA is considered to be a vacation, but
I think if I'm looking at your headset right, isn't that a new headset that you got?
Yeah, I got a new headset, mic, and a Focusrite acoustic system. Audio system is really nice, and then I got a really amazing top of the line computer system. But that was because Landon Kurt Knoll had a investor, him and somebody else. So I can't say who. What all I'm allowed to say, this is by Landon. He says all I'm allowed to say is somebody who's very, very, very well known in the music industry or in entertainment industry. Other than that, I can't say who, because I don't know for a fact who it was. I think I do, but there's somebody who's into the entertainment industry that likes my channel.
Wow.
And they helped donate to buy me a new computer system. Now, my other computer system was bought by Glenn Williamson, Ruhif, and it was still a great computer. I'm using it as a secondary computer. So that's not going to waste either. So I have two computers now and I have my laptop. So I'm tuned in to the internet kind of thing, because I live on the internet. I mean, that's my bread and butter, right? People are like, oh, well, Steve spends a lot of time on Twitter. You go, yeah. I'm networking. I'm meeting people. I'm talking to people. I'm getting guests. This whole thing of like, oh, well, Steve did 5%, the non sequitur show. Well, I got to tell you, that 5% must be a hell of a lot of hours, because I'm talking to a lot of people throughout the day, and I'm constantly emailing. I'm constantly having messages, and I'm constantly making arrangements for things. It's what you do. This is a full-time thing.
It is. What do you use? And actually, let me ask you, this kind of sounds a little off topic, but what do you use for software? Because I've been trying to use something other than Google Hangouts, and I can't get my sound to work properly. So,
well, Google Meet's going to be free here soon, right?
What's that?
Google Meet.
Google Meet. Okay, I haven't used that. Is that what you're using?
Well, no, but Google Meet comes with the G Plus suite. But when Google Hangouts goes away, G Plus, then Google Meet's going to become free for people. So I've been playing around with it. It's actually pretty good. I also have access to Zoom. I also have access to Skype. Obviously, Skype is really, Skype is hit or miss. With a really good connection, Skype's great, and it has NDI, so you can get their camera, and you don't have to like fiddle around with cropping and all that stuff. But Zoom is great for Hangouts too, so you might want to check into Zoom.
Yeah.
But,
and that's one thing I noticed on your channel too, is and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but you have much more conversational sorts of shows, or I know you don't call them shows, but you have much more conversational kinds of things, instead of you going in and saying, I'm going to pick apart this person's video. And a lot of other people have made channels fully on going in and critiquing other people's videos or other people's ideas. And I noticed that you don't do that. And I don't really do that much either, because it's a time waster.
No, I mean, every so often, like for example, the other day, Cheshire and I, we had a person come on. His name was Atheism versus Logic, and we a couple days before, we went over one of his videos. But hey, we went over his videos, and he wanted to come on. I was like, that's awesome, sure. And he came on, real nice guy. We had a great discussion with him, with Emerson Green, who runs a channel I think called Counter Apologetics, and that's what I'm looking for, right? Because we weren't trying to attack him personally. We're trying to attack his arguments. And this is what's the difference between me and other people out there. This is why I think I'm getting a larger following, is that I don't attack people personally. If you have to waste your time attacking a person personally, you have no argument. You're just a troll. And as you know, I get rid of trolls. I've been dealing with trolls in your live chat. I just I don't even have to pronounce it. How do you say the French word for catapult? Tabouche? I don't know. Bullinator uses it, but I just blocked them outright. And I know you block people too, but unfortunately, I think you'd probably use it more than I do. But I just block trolls that are just coming after me personally. They're not worth my time. I don't think about them. They're gone, and I focus on more important things. Because if they want to shout into the wind and they want to basically spend their time trolling, they're perfectly allowed to do that. But it's not going to get them anywhere, because I ignore them. I don't watch any of their stuff. I just get rid of them outright. I don't acknowledge them. I don't respond to their questions, and I never will. I haven't done that before. Why would I start? Because once you start allowing trolls to manipulate the conversation and to goad you, you're just wasting your own time. You're getting away from the things that are important and the things that people want to have conversations with. So
I agree. I agree. I have a.
trebuchet.
I
Thank
got
you,
a
Robert. Trebuchet. Trebuchet.
trebuchet. Okay. I have there's a person in the audience and I didn't catch his name because I think the writing's in Arabic, but he actually asked you a question about what about hell not being a lake of fire, but instead being a state of mind in which you're away from God.
Yeah, no, and that's a good question. There are people. Okay, there's a couple other different things other than hell. There's what's called annihilationism, right? Annihilation is the belief that when you die and you're not saved, you basically just cease to be, right? Which is basically, I mean, people could say it's an atheistic position, right? Because most atheists would say, or at least a naturalistic atheist position would be that there is no afterlife. You could be an atheist and believe in an afterlife. That's true. But if you're at least a naturalist, you would say there's no afterlife. But there's also another one out there by separation of God, the distance from God, right? This is a very similar argument to what's called the privatization of evil, where evil is the distance from God. So in other words, God is good. There's no real property of evil per se, except that evil is the absence of good. That's called the privatization of good. And so there's a position out there that if you die and you're not saved, you're just basically removed from God, and then you have for eternity the knowledge that you never get to see God again. Kind of like, I guess, you never get to see your family again, which is something that is one of the really hard questions, I think, even for theists to answer to themselves, assuming if they're asked, is if they're in heaven and their family members are not saved, that's going to be traumatic to them. And people will say, well, they may not remember them, which again, doesn't make much sense. Or, they're going to be okay with that because they think it's the godly thing to do, which again, not how I operate as far as morality. So there's just a lot of weird questions when it comes to morality and God about if you're saved and somebody else is not saved, if they're distanced from God, if they're, they're on that remote island that you're never going to see in eternity, how are you ever going to really be happy? I think that's a really good argument to be out there, and people have promoted that argument. I've never heard a good defeater for that, and to be honest with you.
Well, the idea that if someone tells you, well, I'll forget about you, that's not exactly a great answer. But as far as my beliefs with respect to that kind of thing, I would say that hell is separation from God and that people choose it. It's not something that and so if you were in heaven,
I would choose it. No,
why did my, like, for example, I had a dream. My brother's not listening. I know he's not, so that's good. He's an agnostic too. And before he was announced he was agnostic, I still thought he was a Christian. And I had this really weird dream where there was a very Nordic looking guy who was sort of, telling me to go away. And he had his arm around my brother and he was leading him down into this space. Was
it Odin?
Yeah, he kind of looked like, he looked Nordic. Like he was stocky, big, and he had burly legs and shorts on, blonde curly hair. It was a very strange dream. So, but then right after, and I also, in that same dream, I was being chased by a bunch of people who were throwing anvils at me. So that was, they're like, get her. And so that was the crazy stuff that goes on in my mind, I guess, probably coming off of Twitter. But
don't you think though, if God is all benevolent, he'd be like, oh, you're agnostic? Well, let me give you the decision, this or that. I'd be like, okay. I can't imagine God sending agnostics to hell merely because they weren't convinced. That just, to me, is not a benevolent being at all.
Well, see, I think that it's the idea of you have a choice. Heaven wouldn't be heaven.
I don't have a choice right now.
But would heaven, let me ask you this, would heaven be heaven if God forced its inhabitants to be there?
Well, it wouldn't make a difference. If God wanted people to force people, he absolutely could, right? But I don't have a choice right now. There's no choice in front of me. God's not here to give me that choice, right? So my brain, I'm a dosastic and voluntarist. My brain has already decided I don't have that belief, right? I can't control that. I can't will myself to believe. I mean, so there is no choice to be had as far as if God right now came to me and said, hey, Steve, I exist. You have this choice, either A, come with me in heaven, or B, get distance from me and separated from me. Then I would have a choice. Right now, I have no choice because people are just, again, walking in the dark, just saying, hey, you have these choices. But no, I really don't, because anyone can make that argument. Hey, worship this God, or, you're screwed. If you don't believe in Vishnu, then and I hate these types of arguments. I really do. But if you don't believe Vishnu is going to send you to eternity in damnation. It's the same principle. These are not real viable options. These are not actual things that I have to make a conscious decision with, because I don't have Vishnu or God or anybody else that I can see giving me the decision to make. Does it kind of make sense?
Well, yeah, and I do believe, I mean, if I were to go with what does the Bible say about your particular view and what you're saying, and it's actually very consistent with Romans 1. So there is a write up on that, and I do believe that you're honestly you don't feel that you can find God at this point, and I think that that's
Yeah.
actually
Can
consistent with what's
I
in
address
there.
somebody saying along the lines of Steve doesn't justify his position? Agnosticism has to be justified, just like any other position. Somebody who says that I claim it doesn't need to be justified. Absolutely wrong. I always have claimed that it needs to be justified. If people get confused, they can go look at my webpage, www.greatdebatecommunity.com, under my positions. And it's a blog post called something along the lines of positions of Steve McRae to prevent the abatement of straw manning or something like that. And in there, I do hold that any position has to be justified to be rational. And that includes agnosticism. Matter of fact, my primary argument for negative atheism, which is based upon Dr. Michael, what is his name? Ah, man, Martin, Dr. Michael Martin, who's no longer with us, but he was an atheist philosopher. He argued that negative atheism requires justification. And negative atheism and agnosticism are the same logical position. So if you're a negative atheist or you're agnostic, they both require justificatory conditions to be rational. So somebody to say that, well, Steve doesn't justify his position, that's absurd. It's the same thing as any other what a weak atheist would hold, that they don't believe or God exists, and they don't believe that God does not exist. They're just calling it a different term. They're calling it weak atheist, which is not the way it actually is in philosophy. I'm calling it agnostic because that's what the agnostic position is in philosophy. But they both require a justification of why you hold that particular thing. And I hold that any position of any kind, whether it be you believe or you don't believe, requires some. Matter of fact, I have a logical proof that says out there that agnosticism has to have a second order justification to it. So when people make these really bizarre claims about me, they've obviously never listened to me. They've obviously never read any of my stuff, and they've also never gone to any video that I have.
Did somebody make that claim in the chat? Did I miss
Yeah,
that?
I mean, again, this is why I'm saying to people, don't listen to other people about me. Listen to what I say about me, because I guarantee it, I know myself better than they do.
That seems reasonable.
I know, it's a weird concept, right?
Let me ask you this, because actually I know you know Susan, and Susan's in the chat right now. She's the one who says slam RN. Susan wants to know have you looked into, I mean, I guess we're in a Christian society primarily. Most people are in the Christian faith here, but have you read the Bible? Have you looked into further investigations?
I've read all of the New Testament. I can't say definitively I've read all the Old Testament, and I know for a fact that I've definitely skipped a lot of the genealogical stuff, genealogy. But I've definitely read the New Testament. I went to seminary and I went to Bible school, not Catholic
seminary. You went to seminary? I didn't know that.
Mormon seminary. Yeah, for years before school, we would, you would have an hour or an hour and a half before class, and we used to go to the church, which was a ward, and then have Bible stuff. Now, granted, I got to admit, I only went because I happened to like one of the girls there, but I did learn a little bit. But it's weird because there's still stuff in the Bible that I learned today that I never saw before. There's numerous things that I've just never noticed in the Bible before, and that's the kind of things I go, well, yeah, that is kind of strange, right? And when people go, well, that's not in the Bible, I'm like, well, yeah, actually it is, and here's the passage. There's a lot of weird things in the Bible.
Yeah, I've read, what I've done is I've read the New Testament tons and tons of times, and then I look at the Old Testament, and I was skipping around the Old Testament. I mean, I've read all of the books, but I've read them not in consecutive order and not very carefully. And so I decided that I'm going to change that. So right now I'm already in the book of what am I starting right now? I just finished Ezra, and so I'm starting Nehemiah, and I'm just in there, and I'm really focusing and concentrating on every single line so I can actually.
People do that. I just don't have an interest in the Bible. I've people are biblical scholars, whether they're theist or atheist, and they enjoy that and they want to talk about it. More power to them. Look, you got Bible history skeptic out there who knows a lot about it. You got Jim Majors who knows a lot about the Bible. You've got Lawrence Yufa from Milwaukee Atheist. There's a whole bunch of people that really enjoy talking about the Bible. I'm not really one of them.
Yeah, a biblical history skeptic. I like that guy, Chris.
Oh, amazing. I love the guy. Yeah,
and Jim's actually pretty funny. He had the must. The person who was Kyle's lawyer.
But see, I go to them. I default to them, right? I just don't know enough about the Bible to really talk about that much, and I don't have an interest in it. I rather talk about things I'm interested in, and it's just like anybody else. They have their areas they read about. I have the interest that I do and that I read about. Mine is not interested in the Bible. I'm just not fascinated by it.
And let me ask you this, because you did say the Mormon faith, and I understand, it's my understanding that the Mormon faith has a slightly different, the Book of Mormon has some variation between that and the Bible. It's my
Well, the
understanding.
Book of Mormon has nothing to do with the Bible. I mean, there's some passages from the Old Testament, but the Book of Mormon is about a couple people that came over from the old world into the new world over in Central America. Okay, that they later became the Olmecs and the Jaredites and the Toltecs. Well, according to the narrative, right? But they were the original. They were the Nephites, Lamanites, and the Jaredites, and these were the precursors to the people living in the Mexico region in Central America, Chichen Itza, Yucatan Peninsula, and that that they are, like I said, the archaeology doesn't really support that at all. Nothing really supports that scientifically at all. But the Book of Mormon is not a Bible. It's a history book, supposed a history book of these people. The Bible they use is the King James version. So Mormons use the King James version.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, actually. So learn something new every day. That's what nice thing about having Steve on. He can bring some
I've read the Book of Mormon
knowledge.
3 times.
You read the book? Okay. And I've read it 0, as you can probably tell. So there's that.
You didn't know that it was actually the Book of Mormon is actually supposedly people, the Nephites and Lamanites that came over from Jerusalem and
no, I didn't
Israel,
know that.
and they came over and they landed at Central America, and their descendants became the Olmecs, the Toltecs, and the Jaredites, or the Tolmecs, the Olmecs, and the Maya, and all that. And then they went down to Peru, and I don't know. I don't know the culture.
I knew none of that. But wasn't there something about bumblebees? So with the Mormons, he said there were bumblebees or something around this time. People have looked in studies and said there were no bumblebees actually in North America at that point.
I don't know. The horses, bumblebees, elephants. Again.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we're coming on an hour and a half. We've had a really nice conversation. I wanted to see, I asked people in the audience, I haven't seen any more well, here's Susan just saying, what's more interesting than what you are doing for your eternity? So
yeah, and she's talking about, she says Book of Mormon is plagiarized. Well, actually, not really, because first of all, how do you plagiarize the Bible? I mean, but the Book of Mormon, they according to the narrative, they had parts of the Old Testament, right, that they took with them. So all Neophyte was doing at the time was supposedly to the narrative was reading what the Bible was saying, and so that they were saying this is what the Bible says. That's not plagiarism, because it even says they know it came from the Old Testament, right?
Yeah. Well, that seems reasonable, and I'll have to investigate that a little bit more, but I haven't desired to do that. So Steve, is there any last? Let me first go back to anyone who joined here. Thank you for coming on, and I wanted to say if you wanted to let people know how they can find you, because you've got a number of places people can find you.
The best way to reach me is actually a DM via Twitter. I have that open all the time because that's how I do most of my contacts information. I need a really good contact manager list. If anybody knows of a good contact manager list through Windows, let me know. I need to have better contact management. But that's the best way. They can also reach me through email, steveaskanything@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook, Steve McRae. I'm on, I don't know what else.
You're on Twitter, Steve McRae with an underscore.
Yeah, it's at Steve McRae _. There's a little underscore there because the other one was already taken without the underscore. That's the best way to reach me. But I do try to get back to everybody. It's just lately I've been inundated with messages. I've actually had to tell people I can't continue on this email thread or Facebook thread or whatever, because I don't have the time. And so there's a lot of other stuff going on. Like we didn't get into it, but obviously I have legal things going on with people. I have got a demand letter out there. People should know that, because the patrons have a right to know what's going on. So I informed them of that. That took some time get that in the process because of time differences when you're working with different time zones, and that finally took place. But yeah, you just reach out to me. Like I said, I always try to get back to somebody if I can, but it's just a lot of people message me throughout the day.
Yeah, I'll have one last question. I see that JM4N. I don't know if you can see.
Love him. Yeah, he's great.
You see what he's asking here? It says, or he or she, it says, ask Steve how he met the burden of proof for his position on agnosticism. This creates interesting dialogue.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I've talked about that on my channel multiple times about why I'm agnostic. And it's the same principles, really. What's funny is there's a lot of, you would agree there's a lot of lack theists, right?
Lack theists? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Ton.
It's the same justification. It's exactly agnosticism and atheism are logically the same position. If you can justify being a atheist, somebody who just says that you don't believe that God exists, and I don't mean it as I use atheism as somebody who actually thinks atheism is defined to be lack of belief and there is no other thing. That's how I kind of use the term, but that's not how Ozzy kind of coined it. But the agnostic position is the weak atheist position. It's also a weak theist position. Weak theism, and agnosticism are logically equivalent. So if you're a weak atheist, you're also a weak theist. If you're agnostic, you're also a weak theist. If you're agnostic, you're also a weak atheist. I've logically shown this to be the case using logic, and that I've not had anybody show that the logic's wrong. And I've actually shown logicians on it, and they're like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. So if you can justify being a weak atheist, you can justify being agnostic. And the point is pretty simple: is that well, you know what? I'll say that for another time. But yeah, I've gone into great detail about why I'm not convinced that there is not a deity, and I'm not convinced that there is a deity. And I make the argument it's more than just saying that you haven't been exposed to enough evidence. I think that's kind of a vacuous argument, which I wrote a blog on recently, which I'm going to have a hangout on the next week or so that you might be interested in. Because when people say, well, I don't believe because I haven't seen enough evidence to convince me, that to me is a vacuous justification, because it's something can be derived through deductive inference, and deductive inference never gives us new information. So it can't be something to be held as a justificatory condition.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know you and I have talked about that before. And I know that there are a lot of arguments out there. If you had to, let me just to add to that real quick. So there are, and I know you've heard them all. You've heard all of the arguments that we have for God's existence, whether it's the cosmological argument or the teleological argument, the moral argument. If you had to pick one that out of all of them that you actually would say, okay, this one is a little stronger than the other ones, even though I don't buy it, but this one seems to be the one that actually is the most.
Okay, I'll tell you this. I used to think fine tuning was one of the worst arguments. And then I watched Dr. Alex Malpass and who was it? Dr. I can't remember his name.
Hugh Ross does a lot on that.
Yeah, Jason something or other. I can't remember. I have to look it up. But actually, it's a lot more complicated than I had imagined. And so I think there is something to be said about the fine tuning argument, even though it doesn't get you to it doesn't get you to theism, right? But I think that if I'm going to if I was to say, okay, there's why is the laws of the way they are, why are the constants the way they are? We happen to exist in a maelstrom of universe that shouldn't be hospitable to any kind of life.
It's true.
Right? But we do exist. Now, do I think that's enough to get me to believe in a God? No, but it begs, I hate to say begs, it actually raises the question, why is it that we are here? Right? But that's what philosophy does. Why are we here? This is an existential question. And people can argue, well, we're just a result of the fact that they are the laws of the laws of the constants, the laws of physics and the constants the way they are. And that's fine. It's the whole puddle argument, the puddle is the same size as the water. And I don't think that's a bad defeater, but the fine tuning argument is a lot more complicated than that when it comes to the anthropic principle. And like I said, Dr. Alex Malpass did a really good debate on that. I'm gonna have to watch it again. Luke Barnes, that's what it was. Dr. Luke Barnes.
I think I might have seen Luke Barnes in some things. Yeah. I'll have to go back and look at that too. And just to add to that, Hugh Ross writes a lot on that kind of stuff. And I know you and Hugh are good friends. So
yeah, like I said, Hugh really respects my channel, stuff like that. But I'll leave you with this. People can listen to these posts and these trolls and out there all they wish. And like you said, controversial, Steve. But my friends and the people that have known me for many, many, many years, they actually come to me and talk to me. And that's why they usually are very supportive. People are always going to be trying to attack people for what they put out there on the internet. It's part of the thing being a public person. And you're always going to see people out there trying to viciously attack people for whatever reason. I surround myself with people who don't do that. Matter of fact, I will chastise any of my friends that go after people personally. I know for a fact, people have gone after you personally. I think that's vile. I think it's reprehensible. Even my worst enemies, I don't want people going after them personally. I don't want people ever to call somebody's work. But I have ethics, and they don't. I know people that have trolled me that have contacted, friends, have call people's work. That to me is unethical behavior. So if they want, if people out there want to listen to these unethical people and want to listen to these people that all they want to do is attack people personally, they have every right to. I'm not interested in those people. Those people are not my audience that I'm trying to garnish.
I agree with you, and that's why I am so liberal with blocking people. People have contacted my work numerous times over the past 3 years. So
yeah, I know I'm very liberal lately of blocking people, but I'll block just straight up trolls. That's all I do. I mean, if somebody has a legit argument, I want to hear it. But you have a troll in the audience I haven't blocked yet. I blocked a couple of them, but I left one because I want people to see what kind of nonsense is out there. They do me a favor. When intelligent people see nonsense, it galvanizes my base.
Yeah, I don't want to name it. I'm not going to name the particular troll who was on your timeline, but there's this one person who's been trolling Steve for like, I don't know, weeks now.
So many people are just noticing
this person trolls from his troll account. He created a second sock puppet account. He trolls Steve, and then someone names him in the next tweet, and he jumps in from his.
He forgot that he was. Yeah, he didn't know what account he was on. He forgot to go back on the troll account to go back on his other account, which was his main account. Yeah, you know, in other words, a troll is a bad troll, I guess, right? I don't know.
That was so funny. Yeah, that was actually, I didn't even think of it like that. You're right. He was going back and forth from his.
That's exactly what it was. You could switch back and forth, and he forgot to go back on his troll account that was created a couple of days ago just to troll me. Brilliant, you know.
Yeah, that was genius. All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for showing up. I was laughing so hard I have tears in my eyes. That's what I was thinking when I go through your timeline.
I find it hilarious. Like I said, if so many people want to make all these Poe accounts or parody accounts and they want to like troll people, that's perfectly fine. That they're spitting into the wind at that point. I don't care. I block them all. I don't care. I don't see it. I don't deal with them. I don't watch their videos. Doesn't have any effect on my life whatsoever. But hey, if that's what they want to spend their time doing, go nuts.
Yeah, let's go for it.
I don't have freaking I care. I still have an audience that I care about, that I have people watching, that I put out product that I like and that I hope people want to watch. That's it. As simple as that. That's the internet for you.
No, I agree. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone. Please like and subscribe. You had a lot of interest here, Steve, and a lot of people have liked the video more than disliked it. We only have one person dislike and 15 likes so far. So that's always a good sign. And it's good to have Steve on. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye.
Good night.